Hi, my name is Flo from this channel you're watching this shit on. I use they, ze pronouns, and today we're going to be talking about library socialism.
Hi, my name's Kiran. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the person who is incredibly passionate about library socialism.
I'm Indigo. I'm using they, it pronouns today, and I also am here.
Perfect.
Glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
So, Kiran, can you tell us a little bit about library socialism?
Yeah, so library socialism is, obviously it's socialism, so that's a good basis to start off. But actually, one of the best things about library socialism is the ease that you can use the library to explain it. Because essentially, library socialism is just taking the ideas and the ideals of a library and then letting them filter down to the entirety of society. So, it starts off with everyone gets to borrow books. Let's start with the basic idea of a library. No one owns the library. It is commonly shared. These are all items that anyone can come in and anyone can use them. Usually you do have to be a citizen of, you have to have an address in the area in order to borrow it. In the perfect society, you wouldn't need that, but so you just looking at a library, you go in, you borrow something, you return it. It's never yours. You have no, ownership over this property, but you still get to use it. And, we can just slowly make that happen for all of society. For instance, if you needed to go get a tent, you wouldn't have to go out and rent a tent and give someone money. You would go to the library and say, hey, I would like to borrow a tent. And, because we would be focusing on creating a much smaller amount of items so that everyone could use them, we would also start to see items increasing in their quality. And I'm doing a nice little tangent, so I hope that was a decent start.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for library socialism, how expansive is the idea? Does it comment on or reflect in regards to wider institutions of private property, or property generally speaking?
Yes, there would be no private property under library socialism. And I did forget to mention at the top here, library socialism is, it was created by the Seriously Wrong podcast, so everything about it was created by these two guys, and they will be able to go more in depth, but I'm going to do my best. All right, back to the question. There would be no private property under library socialism. Everything would belong to everyone. It's, it would be the same with every wider institution. Hospitals, right now we are seeing a lot of issues where it's like someone doesn't have health care, so they can't, or they're not paying something, so they can't access health care and they can't be healthy. And we would just, obviously we would have to consider how do we distribute certain resources, but we've seen time and time again in the world, we have enough resources. We're just either hoarding them or not utilizing them properly. So everything would be shared in common, not just books.
We already see some of that now, where I've been to libraries where you can take out a fucking VR system, and I see tool rentals a lot.
Oh yeah.
But they're getting bigger. I was visiting the library in Arlington. They had a whole wall of stuff you could check out.
Yeah, that's called a library of things. There's a lot of information about it online. It's essentially what it sounds like, a library of things, because libraries are no longer just they're not just lending libraries. They're not just a place where you go and you borrow a book and you leave. Look at all of the services that they already provide other than lending out things. If you go to a library, you can get assistance filling out paperwork. Sometimes they have legal librarians. If currently at the Boston Public Library, you can make an appointment to actually get help job searching. So honestly, libraries have already become so expansive, and I think so many people are just completely unaware of it.
So to recap, it's a form of like communal property wherein things are owned communally, and the way people engage with communal property is modeled on our like modern libraries.
Yes.
How does library socialism interact with other nearby or similar ideologies?
Yes. So library socialism is, at its core, it has to do with property laws. I think it has a lot in common with anarchism. Sort of like, you know, when we're looking, okay, because library socialism also wants to abolish hierarchy. They want no hierarchy whatsoever. In fact, a term that they use is complementarianism. So when we see someone who's better at us at something else, like, you know, I'm not the best at sewing, so if there's someone who's better at sewing, they are not higher up in the hierarchy than me. They are complementary to me because they have a skill that I don't have, and I undoubtedly have skills that they don't have. And, you know, and this is not to say that people who are without skills are, you know, useless, because no one is useless. And, like, if you can't do anything, that doesn't matter. You still deserve to be supported and taken care of. So I do think that library socialism can like work alongside a lot of different political ideologies. Now, is egalitarianism technically a political ideology, or is that just like an idea? Because I know that library socialism and egalitarianism are like this.
I feel like there's probably someone out there somewhere who is like, I'm calling this thing egalitarianism, but I feel like most people think of egalitarian as like a value of which many political ideologies like espouse or seek to enact.
Yeah, so it would, yeah, library socialism and egalitarianism. And I mean, obviously socialism, it's just a way of structuring socialism.
How does library socialism sort of writ large engage with sort of doing it now versus doing it later, or using pre-existing hierarchies in order to implement library socialism? Does it comment at all?
So library socialism definitely, I think that the reason why I was attracted to it so like aggressively, I got so into it. I love library socialism. I have a tattoo that says library socialist because I love it so much. And the thing that attracts me about it is that we already have libraries. We have libraries that are already doing fantastic, amazing things and are like the perfect model for what things can be like. So I think that like when we're talking about implementing library socialism in this current world, the way to do it is just make libraries better. Offer more services, make sure there's more funding, make sure they're staffed, longer hours. I mean, my dream is that libraries are 24-hour hubs of everything. That's like my dream. And obviously, once we start to expand it, you know, like, I remember I brought up tents as an example of like, you know, what you can do with library socialism. And someone said to me, she was like, well, you could just go to an REI and rent a tent. And I'm like, that's money, you capitalist fool. And I was not into that. But so, you know, if once we start to have more, we would have to have different areas to store things. But, you know, I think slowly libraries would just take over the capitalist things that we have in place. I mean, we already have REI, so why not just have the library take it over and start lending out the products, you know?
That's pretty solid. Indigo, do you have thoughts on library socialism and how it intersects with your beliefs?
It's very, I think one of the things that speaks to me about it most is that there would be a lot less waste, because when people purchase things, like everyone has to purchase something that they need, then there's too much of the thing. Like I had to buy a button maker recently, even though I'm not going to be making buttons every single day, because I there wasn't like a library of things nearby that had a button maker. I didn't know anybody that has a button maker, and I have very specific things I want to do, so I got a button maker, and now there's just another button maker that's been produced in the world. And that's just one case amongst like countless cases. And when people no longer use the thing that they got for one specific instance, it often gets thrown away because that's just the easiest thing to do with a thing you don't need anymore. It's very, boom, it's out of your sight, you know, and we have trained ourselves to not think about how that goes in a landfill and it's gonna come back to bite us at some point. And with library socialism, that issue, a huge part of that issue is resolved. If you use a thing and then you bring it back when you're done with it, then it doesn't get thrown away. It keeps getting used, and we don't make a million extra things.
Yeah. There was actually a really, again, Seriously Wrong is the podcast that created the idea. They have several episodes on library socialism. Amazing listen that goes very in depth. But one of the things that was actually brought up at one point was like, how do we make something like technology better and still functional down the line, because we constantly see technology getting out of date. You know, it's like, oh, this computer from 30 years ago, that is not going to do the things that you can do today. So the thing that they proposed was like make it, I think the term is like modular, where you can just take out different components and easily slot one back in. And it's like, yeah, eventually that specific system might go out of date and you'd have to make a new one, but you know, we wouldn't be mass producing in library socialism. There wouldn't be 1 million button makers, because there would be 1,000 button makers that are way better made and not made to break, so that you buy more and you spend more money, and you know.
Also the relationship, I forget the fancy words for it, but the relationship between people making the things and the things would improve, because you don't need to be, if you're not mass producing things, you can get craftspeople who are passionate about the thing, taking time to make these things, and that just, the joy is increasing in the world because of that.
Beautiful, more joy.
Now, I'm thinking of some shitty comebacks, or what's the word? Counter arguments. Right?
Oh, they have, I will say, they have a whole, like, they have so many podcast episodes that are just, here's us addressing your arguments, and it's really good. But if you have any to throw at me.
The one I'm thinking of is like, what about people checking stuff out and being really careless with it, or just not bringing it back at all? How is that managed?
Well, okay, so one of the main things is, you know how currently, if you've ever used a digital library, there are, like when you go on your phone and you pull up the Libby app, you can check out a book, and you check out an ebook for 30 days. False scarcity. But it's false scarcity. So that would be like, that's one of the things that would already sort of be like a lot of people were like, oh, like, well, if I have to check out a bed, like, do I have to return the bed after 30 days? It's like, no, we'd have enough beds for everyone, because we would be thinking about this. We would be able to better know the supply and demand. And, you know, I definitely think there would be like, I guess a learning curve is maybe what you would call it, where we'd kind of have to jump from our current system to the next one. And there might be some scarcity during that. But, you know, eventually it would all be able to equalize. But, yeah, and, you know, I mean, if people are careless, I think that in library socialism, community would be a much bigger factor. You know, we wouldn't have to be terrified of our neighbors like we, for some reason, are in the modern society. And so, you know, if someone like returns something that's broken, well, we'd find a way to fix it. Maybe we'd be like, hey, you can help us fix it. I don't think we would force them to fix it. I think we'd just be like, hey, this was broken, it's a shame, let's fix it. Do you want to help? You know, like everyone's responsibility, not just one person's or one institution's.
I like this model of communal property. It's pretty neat. What about things that are more like you can pass a saw around, you can pass a mattress around, assuming you don't get bed bugs, you can't so much pass a toothbrush around.
Yes.
So how does library socialism approach goods and products that are more like maybe health-wise not good to pass around, or are like closer to single use, I might say?
Yeah. No, so, I mean, I think we've seen, looking at modern medicine, we need to have single-use items. You know, we can't be reusing needles. I think we could probably put more. I'm certain that we would put more research into finding out how to actually reuse these items, because, you know, reduce, reuse, recycle. We always forget about one of those, but I think, yeah. So we would still have single-use items, but more research into finding ways to reuse them, and also creating ones that aren't going to be here forever. I think there are a lot of products now that are like that. I recall seeing at one point bamboo toothbrushes, where it's like, you know, you can only use it for like 6 months, but then when you get rid of it, it will return to the earth. It's not going to be a plastic item around forever. It's like we already have some of these things in place, and they're not as widespread as they could be.
What do you think are some of the main challenges to getting library socialism to have wider acceptance or wider adoption?
Boy, capitalists. Definitely capitalists. I mean, honestly, I feel like when you sit down and explain library socialism to someone, if someone hates a library, they've got some issues. But I mean, people definitely do. We see in the modern world people being like, why would you use a library? You can just go to Amazon. And it's like, but the library free, right there, free. And, you know, I do feel like what a lot of people dislike about libraries is that there are poor people there. And it's like, well, we wouldn't have poor people in library socialism. We wouldn't have homeless people, which would take care of that. But yeah, I really just think the obsession with money. I will say, I know that on the Seriously Wrong podcast, they have discussed how money and credit would work. I personally would just like to get rid of money entirely, so I kind of feel like I don't really care about that aspect of it as much, and I didn't learn as much about it, but they did talk about that. I just don't know about it.
Do you have any more closing thoughts on library socialism? Final summations of your core concepts and ideas?
Yeah.
Exhortations to the general populace, you know?
Library socialism, very good. Very good. Yeah, I mean, I would say go to your local library more. Just go to your local library more. If people are using it more, the city will see that, and then they'll give it more funding. It's a hard battle that will eventually be won, I hope. But, you know, and just think more about libraries. They're good.
There's more going on at them than you think. I checked out a book for a class recently, and they gave me a whole calendar of events that include classes. They have art classes and classes on using digital music production, like Bandcamp. So,
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you never know what's going to be at the library.
The Central branch, they have a 3D printer that you can use. You're only allowed to make like a certain size because, again, we're back to like that. Currently, we do still have scarcity, which is an issue, but regardless of how false it is still something that's affecting the way that the libraries are forced to operate right now. But yeah, like, I mean, it's so, like, I almost want to say donate to your local libraries, but then I'm like, I don't want this to have to rely on money. Just be there more. Look up what your library can do. It's a fantastic resource that not many people think about, and not a lot of libraries currently have a library of things, but if you voice interest in it, like, librarians are pretty chill people on the whole. check them out.
I used to have a roommate who was a librarian, and I remember one day he just came back. He was like, "Yep, just got done chasing fascists," and I was like, "Fuck, man, librarians are cool."
Hell yeah.
All right, thank you for this chat.
Oh.
Oh, that was a good one. That was a
Thank
good
you,
one.
Flo.
Can we do it? Oh, that was a good one. All right. Oh shit. All right.
Socialism.
My siblings in love. Library. Good.